Welcome. I'm Doug Morgan, and you're listening to Uncommon Sense, where we hunt for the truth in the topics you're not supposed to talk about, Christianity and politics. One way to control a population is to make it so they don't know that they're being controlled. Yeah, a society that is well educated is very hard to control because they're more individualistic and less likely to just fall in line. How can you be educated or even understand spiritual things if you can't read? How can you study the Bible, for instance, if you can't read? The latest national figures on students reading at grade level from the 2024 NAEP reading assessment, which a lot of people call the nation's report card, which reports the number of students at or above the NAEP proficient level in each state. In 2024, roughly 30% of U.S. 4th and 8th graders were considered proficient or advanced in reading. That is the national average. 30% is the national average from 2 years ago. This means that more than 2/3 of students can't read at their grade level. There were states like Alaska and Oklahoma and Michigan and Maine that were hovering just over 20%. New Mexico was at the bottom of the list at 19%. This means that less than 1 in 5 kids can read in that state. Natalie Wexler, in her Substack, says college professors are reporting that their students are no longer capable of reading or writing the kinds of complex texts that used to be routine assignments. Although there are surely multiple reasons, it's likely this has something to do with the way we've been trying to teach reading comprehension beginning in elementary school. A couple of recent articles describe the problem in chilling detail. One that appeared in Slate, written by a college professor named Adam Kotsko, who has been teaching for over 15 years, described his personal experience. And while he used to be able to assign around 30 pages of reading per class meeting, he wrote in the last 5 years, quote, students are intimidated by anything over 10 pages and seems to walk away from reading of as little as 20 pages with no real understanding. Now, he's had to spend much of class time simply establishing what happened in a story or the basic concepts of an argument, skills I used to be able to take for granted, he said. Those outside academia, Kotsko writes, are skeptical. Is this really something new, they ask? Haven't college professors always complained about the capabilities of their students? But when Kotsko speaks to fellow academics, he says they get it. Quote, I have literally never met a professor who did not share my experience, unquote. They've had to ratchet down their expectations to meet the abilities of their students. Yes, there have always been students who skip the reading, but, Kotsko writes, we are in new territory when even highly motivated honors students struggle to grasp the basic argument of a 20-page article. So that's what brought this opinion piece by Harry Engel to my attention when he wrote that people don't read as many books as they once did. And that makes me sad. He said, I love books. I want everyone to love books and for children to learn to love reading. And yet, over 30 years, most children have learned to hate reading. And they have now become adults who hate to read. Why? Because their students taught them to. In 1987, California adopted a destructive and now discredited method of teaching reading called whole language. Whole language rejected phonics and instead treated words like symbols. Teachers stopped saying, sound it out. For example, a child would be taught to recognize the word frog, but could not sound out any other word starting with FR. When confronted with words like friend or freeze, the child would have to be cued with a picture or a hint. As a result, children learned to guess. Some learned to do it well and eventually came to phonics, pronunciation on their own. And many did not and remained functionally illiterate, able to read only when they could recognize, but unable to sound out words they had never seen before. And by the early 2000s, all 50 states had at least some school districts using whole language. And some of the most populous states, such as California, Texas, and New York, and even Massachusetts, mandated whole language in all schools. State teacher unions and the National Education Association all supported its adoption. But the experiment on Americans' children failed miserably. The nationwide use of whole language over 3 decades has caused incalculable damage, and it is the worst injustice in U.S. history. An excellent documentary podcast, Sold a Story, that's the name of it, Sold a Story, details the rise and fall of whole language and the people who profited from it, including Lucy Calkins, who formally admitted in 2022 that she was wrong all along. Oops, sorry about the functional illiteracy, kids. Now, I would think an 80-pound gorilla like the whole language fiasco might at least be mentioned once in a 8,600-word article about America's reading problem. I was wrong. The Massive Lament by Rose Horowitz declares the end of reading is here in the Atlantic's August edition, and she fears for the Republic if people don't read more. Daily Wire columnist Jonathan Mimena says she is wrong in a much shorter article. The age of reading isn't over. And I agree with Mimena that reading will be just fine because whole language has now been banned in 42 states. What bothers me most about Horowitz's article is her utter lack of curiosity as to the root cause of doctrinal illiteracy. And she certainly cites some depressing figures. I mean, here's what she said. She says, it's true that Americans' basic reading skills are declining. 4th and 8th grade reading scores have slid for the past decade. And in 2024, in a national test, just 35% of high school seniors were proficient at skills such as analyzing complex fictional themes and evaluating the effectiveness of an author's arguments. Adult literacy scores have also dropped. Nearly 30% of American adults cannot paraphrase or make inferences from a multi-page text. And in 2017, that number was less than 20%. Scary stuff. Yeah, Horowitz's own magazine published a story on whole language and Lucy Kelkin in 2024. Yet, she doesn't mention it. Daily distractions from video slop and social media, though bad, do not somehow prevent students from acquiring reading skills in any functional classroom. The Popularity of such junk is not the cause, but rather the result of the whole language era. Kids who dislike reading and see it as an uninteresting chore they'll entertain themselves somehow. And people are indeed spending less money on books. According to the data from the Federal Reserve Bank, annual retail book sales peaked at $1.4 billion in 2007 and left sharply thereafter. Yeah, they fell to $650 million in 2025. Just after the 2007 sales peak, new technologies entered the world: the iPhone in 2007, the iPad in 2010, e-readers to 2007, and Netflix streaming in 2007. But something else happened in 2008. Thousands of kids crippled by whole language began to graduate from high school. As if on cue, average critical reading SAT scores also began to decline in 2008 as more students began taking the test. Young adults who hate reading probably won't buy books ever again. And Ms. Horowitz's essay is ultimately cowardly and predictably elitist. Rather than seeking a more likely systemic or bureaucratic cause for the disaster she sees, she instead fixes blame on parents. Things are about to get worse and fast. The next generation reads much less than today's adults did when they were kids. And kindergartner teachers say that many of their students don't know nursery rhymes or fairy tales. In the study of 236,000 American adults, only 2% read to a child on a given day. Perhaps I asked too much of Miss Horowitz, he says. A Yale graduate who also attended the elite Phillips Exeter Academy, a $60,000 a year high school for, people in New Hampshire. She was certainly not subjected to the vagaries of whole language era, but a journalist with 8,600 words at her disposal has a duty to investigate the likely cause and origins of any danger to the Republic. So, I think that was very good. I wanted to check out the article that he mentioned from the Daily Wire. It was actually by Amanda Harding of the Daily Wire, and I wanted to bring that to you too. When it came to this, it says when I first saw the Atlantic headline, "The end of reading is here," I felt a familiar sense of dread. If Rose Horowitz's viral essay is to be believed, Americans' reading habit is in a death spiral, and the TikTok generation doesn't seem particularly concerned. Many students now rely on AI to write papers and summarize novels instead of curling up in an armchair and cracking a dusty spine. The statistics Horowitz cites are sobering. According to the National Endowment for the Arts, fewer than half of Americans adults read a book or read a book in 2022. The American Time Use survey found that the share of Americans who read for pleasure on any given day fell from 28% in 2004 to just 16% 3 years ago. But after sitting with the article, I find myself less convinced by its underlying premise. Reading isn't disappearing because books have become relics of another era. Instead, books are becoming yet another element of our culture that must be preserved through thought and effort. And like most things, that all starts and ends in the home with families. Reading is a learned skill. Most importantly, it's a habit. Sustained attention doesn't come naturally in a world full of notifications and endless scrolling, but it can be strengthened with practice. Like exercise, reading becomes easier and more enjoyable the more that we do it. The love of reading typically begins in childhood, and parents have far more influence over that process than some people may realize. That's why parents start reading to children long before they can understand the words. Expectant parents read to pregnant bellies. Newborns are surrounded by, board books. Baby showers, invitations increasingly ask guests to bring a favorite children's book instead of a greeting card. The implication is clear: the more books, the better. Children also learn by imitation. No one is surprised when the son of an avid fisherman grows up loving the outdoors, or when the daughter of a musician starts playing an instrument. Reading is no different. And if children grow up seeing books treated as normal and enjoyable part of daily life, they're far more likely to develop that habit themselves. At our house, she says, the screens are off 2 hours before bedtime and everyone must read books. I have conceded to my children's preference for graphic novels, even though they're not my favorite genre. To counteract this nonsense, we also read books together as a family, working our way through Little House on the Prairie series, the Chronicles of Narnia, Charlotte's Web, The Secret Garden, and most recently, Stuart Little. We love going to the library, the bookstore, and the local book themed or reading events when they arise. We even have a membership to Epic. It's a digital reading platform, so that some of their allotted screen time is devoted to reading too. I'm not I'm not crunchy, she says, nor am I anti-screen. My kids have tablets and gaming systems. Our goal is not to reject modern technology, but rather to manage it and retain the best parts of life, which include reading. Several of my kids are natural readers who love to get lost in the pages of a book. Others struggle to focus and would rather be doing other things. And that's okay. They keep reading even when it's hard or they don't feel like it, because habits are often built long before they're appreciated. I've noticed benefits that extend beyond the page. My older children are articulate, curious, and comfortable discussing ideas well beyond what many people accept for their age. I don't think that's a coincidence. Reading has almost certainly played a meaningful role in shaping how they think and communicate, just as it did for me growing up. Research points in the same direction. One study highlighted by Education Week described the million-word gap, finding that children who are reading too frequently from an early age are exposed to dramatically more language before they even enter kindergarten than children who are rarely or never read or even read to. And for anyone freaking out about the Atlantic article, it's also not entirely true that reading culture has disappeared. It's merely changed with the times. Reading isn't dying, it's evolving. I know because my personal algorithm is chock full of book themed reels, changing from bestseller recommendations to modern interpretations of classics. Book talk is real and it's huge. According to 2026 data, Book Talk recommended titles sold more than 50 million copies across Europe in 2025, generating a little more than $900 million. The same phenomenon is happening in the United States and around the world. Consumers are shelling out hundreds or even thousands of dollars for high-end luxury books. Audiobooks, controversial as they might be, are having a real moment. A recent report found that audiobook sales grew 9% in 2025 to $2.43 billion. Every generation decides which part of civilization are worth preserving. Reading will live on because people, especially parents, pass it down to future generations. If we want our children to become readers, the solution isn't especially complicated. Open a book, read it, let your kids see you enjoying it. Read out loud to your kids, even when they're teenagers. The future of reading will be determined by ordinary families who choose to keep the habit alive. And I liked that. I really do. I think it's encouraging. And many states have made progress in strengthening student learning in phonics. Mississippi and North Carolina have recently passed laws and spent large sums to encourage teachers to use the science of reading. The states of Ohio, Colorado, Minnesota, and Arkansas also emphasize the need for instruction in evidence-based phonics. And so, what is the science of reading? Well, tntp.org says it this way. It says, the science of reading is not a single program or technique, though it does provide evidence for a set of techniques that can best support all students to become proficient readers. It also addresses more than just profound skills. It includes word recognition and foundational skills and language comprehension skills like building vocabulary, content knowledge, and comprehension. And emerging models also point to the importance of cultural knowledge and motivational encouragement and engagement and an extensive function to fluent reading. So the bottom line, the science of reading is a body of evidence that tells us how students learn to read, and includes evidence supporting, phonological and phonics awareness. It includes phonics itself and word recognition, fluency, vocabulary content knowledge development, and comprehension. To meet the needs of all learners in the sciences of reading approach, students must have access to complex, culturally and linguistically relevant texts. The science of reading has been a hot topic among educators and academics and parents over the past few years, as states and school systems rush to find solutions to the country's reading crisis. And the urgency is real. So this is what I turned to. So I was wondering, what is the National Teachers Association, or the NEA, doing about it? Are they pushing for states to adopt the science of reading initiatives? Well, we went to the NEA's own website and found this article entitled "The Multiverse of the Science of Reading," and it was written by Grace Hageman. And here are just a few snippets from the article. I'm not going to read the whole article to you. You can go and you can find it online real easy. But I'm going to go over a few snippets. Here's one of the things that they said. Quote, "While there is commonality in how reading professionals think reading should be taught, there are differing definitions of the science of reading. The overall movement chooses to focus on a single approach of systemic phonic instruction, claiming it should work for all students," unquote. So they're saying that they don't like the science of reading movement because it wants to take phonics-based plans to everyone. But then listen to this. It says, because of these mandates, educators have become limited in how they can teach, and students limited in how they can learn. Ultimately, this approach removes teacher autonomy in the classroom and influences a deprofessionalization of educators. So, because these states want to go back to what has worked for centuries in teaching kids to read, this is, and they ironically use a non-word here. This is deprofessionalizing teachers. They are upset that teachers can't use methods of teaching that have proven not to work. They are upset that teachers have to use phonics, a method that teaches kids how to read. But let's go on. It says about 80% of reading teachers are women. So a movement that is, here's that word again, deprofessionalizing an entire profession who is almost entirely women should raise some concerns. That's something I tried to beat the drum on. I don't think we would do this to a profession that was 80% men. I'm certain of that. This quote was from a gal by the name of Julie Hines Lyman, who was a 33-year-old long teacher from Chicago that resigned when they told her that she had to teach phonics. So this is really interesting, right? So the sexism card is being played here. What she is saying is that because teachers are being told to use phonics, if they don't like it, then it's sexist. So let's play this out a bit. Can we play this logic out a bit? In the U.S. road and highway construction workforce, it's made up of about 90% men, 89 to 90%. So because we tell them that they have to use asphalt on the roads, it is deprofessionalizing them. What we should do is allow those that don't like asphalt and would rather use peanut butter to go ahead and use that. If we do not allow them to use peanut butter on the roads and the highways and only restrict them to asphalt, then we are being sexist, since the industry is made up of mostly men. Now, does that make any sense to you? But let's see what else they have to say. We're erasing decades of including more women in text, more black and brown people in text. So the diversity is gone because the science of reading is very conservative and traditional, in the sense that it's just saying kids just need to know the relationship between letters and sounds. Oh, and here it comes. The race card. Yes, we love the race card here on the podcast. But we are now racist for wanting to teach phonics to kids. Women, people with black skin, and even people with brown skin don't learn to read using phonics. That is what she's saying. This seems to me to be both sexist and racist. Wouldn't you agree? But let's look at this too. It says, I think that it can be very damaging to a student's self-esteem to always be working in areas of deficit and not creating success and building on success by individualizing and taking the small steps forward that those kids need. That's Lyons Hyman. That's what she said. And she said, and this is, I mean, if the sexist thing didn't work, if the racist thing didn't work, so we're also damaging kids' self-esteem by focusing on an area that they don't know. We should be teaching them things they do know so they can feel good about themselves. Yeah. Never mind what, being an illiterate adult feels like and does to one's self-esteem. We will just ignore that as teachers, can't we? All right. And here's this one. On the other hand, you have kids who are very advanced and they're being asked to be in this very rigid skills-based curriculum, and they are already reading chapter books at home, so those students are also getting damaged, is what Hines Lyman said. Oh, so learning to read now damages kids too. If they learn how to read, then They're getting damaged, according to the NEA. All right, lastly, it says, I kind of see it as our role as reading teachers, whether I'm a classroom teacher or an interventionist, to figure out what is the system or the program or the approach that's going to work for individual kids and meet them where they're at. It's not really, one size fits all. That's what Catherine Campbell says. She's a reading interventionalist, if you hadn't caught that, from Virginia. She says, it's not appropriate for them to be telling me that I can't use what I can't use for classroom strategies. My toolbox should be full, and I should be able to use whatever I see in my professional judgment to be the best approach for individual students. Yeah, don't tell me what to do is the attitude here, right? Yes, Miss Campbell, your role is to figure out what teaches kids how to read. But you have not been doing that for decades now. You have failed in your responsibility. And now our kids, our young adults, heck, our country is hurting because of it. I don't know. I would love to hear what you think on it. Maybe you've seen, effects of this. Maybe you haven't. I would love to hear from you. Of course, you can always do that at uncommonsensepodcast.com. Go to our YouTube page and like us there. Subscribe. That would be helpful. Thank you for listening. This podcast is a production of Morganite Communications.